Today, we're going to be analyzing a deal as a four-bedroom property for Section 8, specifically for long-term rentals. And yesterday, people said the volume was a little low, so I'm going to try these AirPods today instead of using my mic, see if that was the reason. So today, let me show you exactly what I'm looking at. I'm filtered in the Birmingham market, all right, Birmingham, Alabama, for four-bedroom properties. Properties are single-family homes and properties that have just come onto the market in the last 3 days. So time on rent in less than 3 days. All right. Now, I found this property. This is 987 Chichester Drive, Birmingham, Alabama, 35214. So when I get a property like this, right, the first thing I want to do is I want to look up the rents for this area. And I'm going to go to two places. The first place I'm going to go to is HUD FMR, HUD space FMR. And this gives you the fair market rents. That's what the FMR stands for. When you click on the top link of Google, you're going to come to this page, and I want you to scroll down to the bottom where it says access to small area FMRs. Then you're going to click on FY 2025 small area FMRs. And then you click on Alabama. You can click on the county. And this property is in Jefferson County. And now you're going to get by bedroom count, by zip code, your rent ceiling. So this is right here. Four bedroom is 1580. That's your rent ceiling right now. All right, rent ceiling. This up. Rent ceiling is going to be right over here. Three, 5, 2, 1, 4. Four. 1480, right? Oh, 1580. 1580. And then the three bedroom is 1420. Great. So now that I know my rent ceiling is, I have to go check on my market rents because I have to compare both of those to see what's more reasonable rent I can charge for this property. So if I go to affordablehousing.com and I go to the market rent estimator under the owner section, right? I plug that right in here. I can plug in the address, plug in bedroom count, and I can see right here that the average rent for 24 units within a 3.4-mile radius is $13.53. So let me write down all these numbers. So $13.53. This is for 24 units within a 3-mile radius. 1918 is the county, 1290, 1980, 1290 for the city, 1139 for the zip. So this property looks like it's, so in the vicinity, it looks like it's actually getting a higher rent within 3.4 miles. Now, because 1353 is lower than 1580, I have to use 1353 because that 1580 also includes, right, that's a rent ceiling. That also includes utilities. So if you don't include utilities with your rent, you have to back out the utility allowances that's usually listed right out by your housing authority, by bedroom count, by type of utility, from your rent ceiling. So either way, it makes it easier because the market rent here is actually lower than the 1580, the ceiling. So I'm gonna use 1353 for my rental assumptions here. Okay, great. Now you also might be asking, hey, what does it mean by the reasonable rent? And I'm gonna show you exactly what that is. If you are able to find the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook, Housing Choice Vouchers was previously known as Section 8. They rebranded it from Section 8 to Housing Choice Voucher because of all the negative connotations associated with the word Section 8. So that's what became the Housing Choice Vouchers. Interestingly enough, if you go to Section 2.2 here in comparability, it says that in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA, or the Public Housing Authority, must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassisted units. So obviously size, unit type matters, but this essentially means that you cannot charge more rent to someone simply because they are a voucher holder, right? For obvious reasons. Now, obviously, four-bedroom properties, right? You rarely ever see four-bedroom apartments. So that's why I have pretty good confidence that these 24 units for these properties are four-bedroom single-family homes. So now that I know that's a more reasonable rent, that is the reason I'm going to use this rent as my assumption for my analysis or my underwriting, whatever you want to call it. There's going to be gurus out there that you're going to learn and that's going to teach you, like, oh, just look up the SAFMR and that's the rent. but they fail to tell you about the rent reasonableness test. And that's a very, very important test because if you went ahead and thought, oh, I'm going to make 1580 on this property, you're very wrong, right? I mean, there are exceptions, but those are definitely the exceptions, not the rule. In general, the rent you're going to get is likely going to be below your payment standards because your payment standards typically includes utilities. So just be very, very mindful of that. So let's go ahead and analyze this deal together, right? So this property, 4-bedroom property, $200,000 is the listing price, 200 grand. Let's go to my rehab calculator. Let's look at the condition of the home. This property looks pretty good. I mean, if I can't see any of the guts, but I would say it's pretty much rent ready, and there's a garage. Great. So for this property, I'm gonna assume I don't need to paint the place. Okay. So I'm gonna go to the property to my rehab calculator. In row 6, I'll put aside 1,500 bucks for the roof, just in case there's something that I can't see. In every property that I bought, I've always had to do some either patches or repairs to the roof. So I'm setting that aside now. Next up, I got $500 for my landscaping. Okay. And here's what's going to happen. You have to keep the property tidy until you get it rent ready. Otherwise, you get code violations. So landscaping expenses can't you can't assume zero. You got to do it. Someone's got to do it. So better you put it aside now. I'm not gonna have to paint any of the place, so I'm leaving this zero. I'm assuming the pictures are good. I don't have to do any flooring work because I didn't see any carpet here, so row 90 is okay. I'm not doing any kitchen or bathroom renovations. I'm only going to replace 2 of the toilets with high pressure flush toilets because I have these at my home and I've never gone a clogged toilet call before. And I don't intend to start doing that now because I don't want to spend my time, right? If you get a clogged toilet call, you're probably going to spend $100 to get a plumber out there, another 200 bucks to replace the toilet. So I might as well replace with a brand new one for like 450 bucks now. Seriously, my time and my energy is worth so much more than waiting down a road for the $100 fix. So that's my personal preference. I have to fix everything up front, so I have to worry less. Similarly, for my HVAC, I'm going to be putting a cage around my HVAC in this market because I've had a HVAC stolen before. So I'm going to put this cage on. That's what I'm going to do because I really don't want my HVAC getting stolen again because that would cost me a lot of money. So I got 4560 right now for my total repairs. So that's going to flow right into B6. Got my rents right here. For my property taxes, I'm going to get it right from my Redfin calculator. So this is $76 right here. So I'm going to use 76 in B28. For my insurance number, I see that estimate's 155 right here. So I'm going to equals 155 times 1.2. And I'm multiplying by 1.2 because I'm adding a 20% premium by multiplying by 1.2. Because I'm assuming that 155 earlier is for someone that's buying it as a primary residence property. And if you are using it as an investment property, chances are people are going to view that as a riskier asset. So that's why I'm adding a 20% premium right here. Then I got a 10% maintenance for this property. I got 10% property management. I got 5% for vacancy. Now, the most important number right here is this number right here for maintenance. You are going to replace that roof at 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Same thing for your HVAC, same thing for your water heater. It's going to break eventually. So if you don't set aside money right now, you would be underestimating your expenses and overestimating your profitability, thinking you're making all this extra money when in reality you're not, right? Don't make that mistake that I did. Okay. Set this money aside now because it's going to come sooner or later, especially if you are a long-term buy and hold investor. All right. Don't ever believe any of the gurus that, oh, it's a turnkey property, there's no maintenance, it's brand new. That's not true. You're gonna replace it at some point. All right. So now for F19, I got 25% down payment. And so my down payment is going to be equal to B4 times my 25% down payment in F19. So I'll be $50,000 down. I got 2.5% for the closing costs. And then I got my financing amount in K6. So that's going to equal to my B4, my asking price, minus my down payment percentage of $50,000. That's how I get my financing amount of 150 grand. Now, let's say it's probably closer to about 7.5% interest rate right now in the market. So if I rent this property out for $1,353, right? And my cash flow, I will be losing $296 a month with all those expenses. That's a negative 6% return. So I bought this property for 200 grand. with a rehab of $4,600, 20%, 5% down, and 7.5% interest rate. Now imagine, right? You underwrote this deal. Let me do this first. Let's figure out what would it be. Let me lower the asking price so that my cash and cash return goes to 10%. Now, I'm not saying 10% is a magical number. That's just simply a benchmark. This is not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. I'm just simply showing you all how to mess with the inputs so that you can get to what you think is the deal. So if I go to 100 grand right here, great. How about 95 or 98? Boom, probably 95. So with all of these details here, if I buy this part for 95 grand, assuming everything else stays constant, then that's how I would be able to get a 10% return. Now, does that mean I'm going to get this property for 95 grand when I was listed for 200? Probably not. But at least now you know what it would make it a deal given the circumstances. Now let's do a few more scenarios. Let's say your interest rate is now 6%. See what happened to the cash and cash return number? It just jumped. So now you might be willing to pay 105 grand and still achieve a 10% return. Maybe 106. Yeah, that still rounds up to 10. So if you're paying attention to the 10-year yield, that's what we talk about, right? Because what affects the 10-year yield? Economic conditions, all this stuff about tariffs, and the prediction of what's happening in the market overall, with between labor data, unemployment data, expectations of what the Fed are going to do. Not what the Fed is doing, but what expectation of what they're going to do. Right? This is why you hear in the headlines, oh, they're pricing in 4 Fed cuts, rate cuts, blah, blah, blah. The bond market moves faster than the Federal Reserve. So that's why you got to pay attention to the 10-year Treasury yield, because the 30-year mortgage interest rates are affected by two things. One is the spread between the interest rate on the 10-year yield with the 30-year mortgage interest rates. So obviously, the second factor is the interest rate of the 10-year yield itself. Historically, that spread has been 1.5 to 2%, but now it's like 3%. So it's wild, right? Because there's a lot of volatility. So you got to pay very, very close attention. Even if the 10-year goes down a little bit, but then the spread narrows, that's how you get a big movement in your interest rates. And that's just how your affordability goes up, because we just proved that you can achieve the same return on this property and be willing to pay $11,000 more, assuming you can rent this product for $1,353 a month, because now you're cash flowing $276 a month because your interest rate is now 6% instead of 7.5%. Big difference. Now let me do one more scenario. Earlier we talked about rent reasonableness. This is where people lose money. This is where people make mistakes. Unless you can get verification from your housing authority, which I highly recommend. But if you underwrote this property at 1580, right? Look what happened to the return. You might be willing to pay, instead of 106, you would have paid 132 grand instead of 106. So you would have paid $26,000 more because you overestimated your rents for this property, because you still thought this property would get you roughly almost 10% return, even though it's 9.7, I'm rounding up. But that's how a big mistake will cost you if you did not know the rules. All right. So hopefully this was helpful for everybody. My goal is I hope you copy my homework, right? I hope you analyze the same deal you analyzed today using the same spreadsheet, right? This property's on the market. You guys want to copy the spreadsheet? Just go to affordablehousing.io, go to the Get Deal Analysis tool, plug in your name, your email, your phone number. That's the fastest way you're going to copy the spreadsheet. And from that point onwards, I hope you start your own YouTube channel and put it up there, because I know how hard it is to get started. And if someone asks you, hey, why do you think this is the deal? You can say, I know this is a deal because I've been looking at properties for the past 500 days, right? Covering all these topics just from you copying my homework. You can do it. Might that give you some confidence that you know what you're doing? I certainly hope so. All right. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Sunday. Spend the quality time with your family and friends today. That's what life is all about. All right. Oh, I got one chat. Where would I find this for Minnesota? So Josh, sorry, I missed your message a little bit earlier. What you're gonna want to know is you're gonna look up your county or your city for whatever property you're looking for, right? Look up SAFMR, or let's say you are in Minneapolis. Look up, I'm making this up, right? Unless it's the county that governs it. Look up Minneapolis Housing Authority payment standards 2025. Let's see if we can find it. Minneapolis Housing Authority 25 payment standards. There you go. So this gives you your utility allowances. So this is what I was telling you about, right? If you don't provide utilities, so you got to take your 2,064 and you got to subtract your utilities that you don't provide. Here's your fair market rent, and here's your payment standard. So this tells you right here that even though your HUD FMR state parent fair market rent is 2244, the city says, hey, our housing authority will only pay up to 2,064 for utilities and rent. So that's what the voucher covers for 3 bedrooms. And if you don't cover electric for heating, if you don't cover gas for cooking, then you got to deduct that amount. If you don't cover water and sewer, you got to deduct $84. If you don't cover trash, you got to deduct $33. So this is what you have to do to figure out what is your maximum rent. And then also, that's likely going to be it. But I would go one step further and see what your market rents are on affordablehousing.com, so you can have a quick understanding of, hey, if they decide to go more reasonable rent, not the payment standards, but more reasonable rent, is that lower or higher compared to this Minneapolis public housing? So as simple as that. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Josh. I know you asked that question. I'm not seeing any responses from you, but I wanted to make sure I answered your question and showed you how easy it was for me to look up a city and a housing authority and their payment standards. Now, other housing authorities, they might require a little bit more digging. I'm not going to say every housing authority was that easy, but you can do a little bit of research. You can call them, and the best way to do it is just to show up and ask them. All right. Hopefully, this was helpful, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 563. Have a good one, everybody.